Right, 8:45 here on this program. Good to have you with us. So, a very serious issue. As matrics return to school this week, they have to adhere to strict health protocols to curb the spread of COVID-19. But this is a difficult task considering the state of sanitation at many schools. While responding to a written question from a Member of Parliament recently, Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga said her department plans to eradicate pit latrines at nearly 4,000 schools across the country by 2022. 68 of these facilities have been provided with what are referred to as Sanitation Solutions. 5 years after the loss of young Michael Komape, who died in a pit latrine in Limpopo, the situation remains dire for thousands of learners. Well, to talk to us about this, we are joined by Zanele Modise, who is Equal Education's Head of National Organising. Great to have you. Thanks very much for joining us on the programme.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. I mean, it's always shocking to hear about pit latrines still being used in some communities, and even more shocking that learners still have to endure using these structures. Can you perhaps describe to us what the current situation is like in South Africa?
I mean, as Equal Education, in our constant communication with our equalizers, which are school-going members of EE, and your principals, your schools, in our constant visits to gather information on the sanitation of schools, we have come across a school with of 566 learners who had to use plain pit latrines. And because the situation of the plain pit latrines was such a terrible one, learners were resorting to relieving themselves in open air. Now, this paints a picture of how dire the situation is at schools still contending with plain pit latrines as a form of sanitation, a clear violation of the right to basic education that should allow for a dignified, safe and conducive learning environment for learners. Now, these schools are unlawful as per the minimum uniform norms and standards for school infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it seems that last year we were talking the same numbers. What is the sense of urgency from government on this matter? And let's bring into the picture the fact that we're in a pandemic, and one of the top priorities and mandates for a school to return was that sanitation was at these schools. But it seems like we've been on pause.
I mean, there's no sense of urgency, and this is disheartening because learners are the ones who are suffering from this lack of political will to address the issue of plain pit latrines in schools. And in 2018, we even wrote a letter to the president about the appalling plan to fix the schools or the toilets in Limpopo. This was from the structural order in the Michael Komape case. The Minister Motshekga, and the then MEC for Education in Limpopo said they will only be able to fix or address sanitation backlogs in 2026, and they have been noting that budgetary constraints, among others, are why they have not been complying with the minimum norms and standards for school infrastructure. And this is interesting because when they are mentioning that they are constraints in terms of budget, the Limpopo Department of Education in particular has been underspending on its infrastructure grant. There is no political will, as I've mentioned. They are basically saying learners must wait, and learners having to wait means using plain pit latrines that are not age appropriate, are unsafe, that are dirty and do not lock and provide privacy.
You know, when we hear from the department that they have provided sanitation solutions, can you perhaps tell us what have they been provided with? What does this mean?
I mean, in 2018, the president announced that there's going to be a safe initiative, but it has been very difficult to monitor the progress of this initiative due to lack of publicly available information. And we have been calling for this information or plans to be made public so that the community or the public is able to monitor this initiative. And no plans have been published, as we know. But what we know is that from the 188 projects that were completed through the Safe Initiative, only 18 were funded by donors, and the 170 were funded by pre-existing funding, which is the ACD, which is the Accelerated School Infrastructure Delivery Initiative, and also the EIG, which is the Education Infrastructure Grant.
Yeah, you know, I'm reading just of of one school, this one particularly in the Eastern Cape. And, this is in Koffenwab. I'm sure that you're fully aware of the situation, but just for viewers that aren't too aware. So what had happened was, in a rush to resume classes for 55 grade 7 learners and to limit the risk of infection in schools, the department delivered 4 mobile toilets for learners. And one for 12 teachers. So the school has 309 learners, so it meant 167 boys shared one toilet and 142 girls shared the other 2. Nobody had cleaned these toilets. They'd been cleaned once since it was delivered on the 8th of June. One can only imagine the state that these toilets are in. This is not sustainable. I mean, this is not a solution.
It really isn't. I mean, also from the images of plain pit latrines that we have been seeing on social media and that we have been seeing on our school visits, you can just see how dangerous those structures are, and that they do not promote health and hygiene, and they do not even provide privacy and security for learners. There is no way that basic hygiene products such as your soap, your hand sanitizers, your toilet papers are going to be there. And we have been calling for toilets that provide safety, promote hygiene and privacy. And you, as you have mentioned, that some schools have been provided with mobile toilets as a form of relief. And while that has been welcomed, we want to know when permanent structures will be put in place as per the norms and standards for school infrastructure. We cannot be still having schools having to contend with plain pit latrines. It's illegal to have those schools.
That's the bottom line. It is illegal to have these kind of structures in these schools. And there is so much money that's gone into it, with Treasury allocating around 3.4 billion rand to the initiative over the 2019 medium-term expenditure, if my figures are correct here. The private sector has also pledged millions to try and help this. Are you seeing these funds actually being translated on the ground? Because from the pictures, from the reports, and from the report back as well in Parliament from the Minister herself, it doesn't feel like they are offering tangible solutions.
I mean, we are still reading articles noting that there are 4,000 public schools that still have plain pit latrines as a form of sanitation. And the number itself is telling. While there has been work, as I've mentioned, in providing some relief to schools, it is not happening at a pace that is addressing the urgency of schools. And there has not been political will. And in our statement, we have been constantly calling for the departments to plan better. Planning better ensures that there is coordination between the Department of Basic Education, the provincial education departments, and the relevant local governments to make sure that information from schools is reliable and the data that they have at hand is reliable, so that they are able to address these issues that are faced at schools. We have, as I've noted, that the Limpopo Department of Education has been saying that they are financial constraints, but there is no planning better. So if we aren't seeing clear plans, clear coordination between departments, reliable data, this money is going to go to waste. And we are going to be hearing even 3 years from now that the departments does not have funding.
Yeah. I mean, the minister has now set 2022 as her target to get rid of pit latrines. It always seems that target is being moved. It's a constantly moving target. Looking at the work being done, do you think this is possible? I mean, there are even provinces, and again, I just emphasize the Eastern Cape because that's just the one province's report I have in front of me. They're saying that they are under-reporting the amount of pit latrines that are actually in the province. So do you think 2022 is likely?
I mean, that's an important point to make, that there is underreporting on the number of plain pit latrines. As I'm saying, that there needs to be a clear coordination between departments so that the information is not just picked up from above, is happening and reflective of what learners are going through. The 2016 deadline was very clear of the minimum uniform norms and standards for school infrastructure, that the department must ensure that schools made of unsafe structures are eradicated. And the deadline came and went. we still have schools that have plain pit latrines. The Education MEC in Limpopo, in her maiden budget speech last year, made a promise that there will never be talk of plain pit latrines in the next financial year. March 2020 came and went, and we still have schools in Limpopo that have plain pit latrines. And this year, as per the norms and standards for school infrastructure, is the second deadline. But we are already seeing that the department is going to miss that deadline, as now they are using the 2020 as the year to eradicate all the plain pit latrines. This is really unacceptable. The minister set these deadlines for herself and her department. This was not equal education. This was not the public. The minister and herself set these deadlines for herself and her department, and this is a legally binding document. As ordinary citizens, social movements, and the media, we need to monitor and actively monitor the compliance of the minimum norms and standards deadline and ensure that accountability is taken.
Yeah, Zanele, thank you for talking to us. Zanele Modise is the head of the National Organising Committee for Equal Education, talking to us about poor sanitation that is still such a challenge for thousands of schools across the country. Let's take a break. Before we say goodbye,